Before you spend that penny, stop. Some Lincoln 1-cent coins hiding in your pocket change are worth hundreds, even thousands of dollars in 2025. Rare dates like the 1909 SVDB, the 1914 D, and crazy errors like double dies or missing mint marks are bringing huge money. And the best part? These show up in regular circulation every single day. Check your pennies. The rare one might be in your hand right now. The 1973 Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins that millions of Americans carried in their pockets without ever considering it special. It was just another copper penny, familiar and ordinary, a coin that blended into everyday life. But among the enormous number of 1973 pennies minted that year, a very small group left the U.S. Mint with errors so dramatic, so visually striking, that they would later become some of the most sought-after pieces in modern numismatics. These rare errors have transformed an ordinary 1-cent coin into a high-value collectible, with certain examples selling from $60,500 all the way up to $144,500. Depending on the nature of the error and the condition of the coin. To understand why these errors matter so much, it helps to look at the context. In 1973, the U.S. Mint was operating at full speed. The country was going through significant economic and political change, but coins still had to be produced in massive quantities for everyday use. The Lincoln cent, first introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln's 100th birthday, had already become a symbol of American currency for more than 6 decades. The obverse still featured Victor David Brenner's classic portrait of Lincoln, and the reverse displayed the Lincoln Memorial, a design introduced in 1959 and used throughout the 1970s. These 1973 cents were made of 95% copper and 5% zinc and tin, weighing 3.11 grams. A classic copper composition that collectors love today. The Philadelphia and Denver mints struck hundreds of millions of them. With such heavy production, errors occasionally slipped through the cracks. Most were minor and went unnoticed, but a handful were so unusual that they became legendary. One of the most valuable types of 1,973 penny errors is the off-center strike. This error occurs when the planchet is not seated correctly between the dies during the strike. Instead of receiving the design perfectly aligned, the coin shows a noticeable shift, sometimes slight, sometimes dramatic. A small off-center shift might not be worth much, but a 40% to 70% off-center strike, especially one where the date, 1973, remains clearly visible, can command enormous value. The visual impact of a major off-center strike is undeniable. These coins look almost incomplete, with large blank areas and distorted rims. When found in high-grade condition with full red luster, they've sold in auctions for $60,500 and higher. The most dramatic examples, particularly those with the lettering and portrait partially missing, create a unique appearance that collectors compete fiercely to obtain. Another extremely valuable type of error is the double strike or multiple strike. This happens when the coin is struck once, fails to eject from the press, and receives a second or even third strike. Depending on how the coin shifted between strikes, the second impression may be doubled, rotated, or dramatically misaligned. These pieces often show repeating outlines of Lincoln's portrait, doubled numbers in the date, and ghost-like images on the reverse. Each double-struck penny is one of a kind. No two errors look exactly alike, which makes them especially appealing to collectors. A 1973 penny with a second strike almost completely off-center, combined with full mint luster and no circulation marks, sold for $88,000, and another even more dramatic example reached $117,500, showing how rarity and visual impact work together to drive prices upward. There are also 1973 pennies with the highly coveted wrong planchet error. A wrong planchet error occurs when a penny die accidentally strikes a blank that was intended for another denomination or even a foreign coin. Some 1973 pennies were struck on dime planchets, making them smaller, lighter, and silver in color instead of copper. Because the penny design doesn't fit entirely on a dime planchet, parts of the lettering, portrait, and Lincoln Memorial appear clipped or missing. These coins are instantly recognizable and extremely rare. One of the finest known examples, struck on a clad dime planchet and certified mint state 67, sold for $144,500, making it one of the most valuable 1973 penny errors ever recorded. Another category of interest includes broad strike errors, which occur when the retaining collar fails during striking. Without the collar, the coin spreads outward, producing a wider, flatter penny with no clear rim. These errors are less visually dramatic than major off-center strikes, but in high grades they still attract strong interest. Some 1973 broad strike pennies with full red luster have reached prices above $15,000, and exceptional pieces, especially those combined with die cracks or minor off-centering, can sell much higher. Collectors also pay close attention to die break errors or cuds, which occur when a part of the die breaks off and leaves a raised lump of metal on the finished coin. A 1973 penny with a large cud on the obverse or reverse is rare because such die damage usually forces the mint to replace the die quickly. The fewer coins struck after the damage occurs, the rarer the error. Some large cuds on 1973 cents have fetched prices over $20,000. Especially when the coin remains in high mint state condition. One of the more dramatic but less common errors involves the missing copper layer, which happens when the copper coating fails to adhere to the zinc planchet. Although 1973 pennies were not supposed to be zinc cored yet, transitional planchet mistakes and experimental strikes occasionally produce copper-thin or partially missing layers even in non-transition years. These unusual coins appear streaked, discolored, or oddly textured, and although rare, they can bring significant value when authenticated. Some 1973 cents with unusual metal layer issues have sold for $12,000 to $25,000, and combined errors raise this number considerably. As with all collectible coins, condition plays a massive role. A dramatic error in poor condition may still be valuable, but nothing compares to the prices realized by coins in exceptional mint state grades. Coins graded MS66, MS67, or higher with bright red color, labeled RD by grading companies, achieve the highest premiums. A single grade difference can increase value by tens of thousands of dollars. A 1973 penny error graded MS67 red with a strong off-center strike sold close to $100,000, simply because the color, luster, and surfaces were near perfect. The appeal of these error pennies goes beyond their monetary value. For collectors, each coin tells a story of a machine malfunction, a split-second misalignment, or a forgotten foreign blank that transformed a routine minting process into an accident frozen in metal. In other words, each error is a historical and mechanical snapshot. These coins escaped quality control, entered circulation, and eventually surfaced decades later, often discovered by someone casually sorting through old change. Many collectors enjoy the idea that these rare pennies could still be out there. The year 1973 wasn't so long ago, and countless pennies from that era remain stored in jars, coin rolls, and old collections. Someone sorting through a handful of old cents might spot a blank segment, a doubled image, a strange silver color, or a distorted rim. In that moment, an ordinary search becomes extraordinary. Anyone who believes they found a 1973 penny with an error should avoid cleaning the coin, as cleaning can immediately destroy thousands of dollars of value. Instead, the best next step is to have it authenticated and graded by a reputable company like PCGS or NGC. Once certified, the coin's value becomes more secure, and collectors gain confidence in purchasing it. The 1973 Lincoln penny errors represent a fascinating blend of history, rarity, and mechanical imperfection. These coins remind us that even in a highly controlled manufacturing environment, accidents still happen, and sometimes those accidents create something far more valuable than the original product ever intended. Whether it's a dramatic off-center strike, a wrong planchet rarity, a bold double strike, or a unique die break, the best 1973 penny error examples have reached prices from $60,500 up to $144,500, turning small copper coins into remarkable treasures. The next time you come across a 1973 penny, take a moment to look closely. Hidden among the ordinary may be a unique piece of minting history waiting to be rediscovered. The 1976 U.S. Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins that millions of Americans handled without ever noticing anything unusual. It was a coin spent on candy, saved in jars, dropped in car consoles, and passed across countless store counters. Yet among the enormous number of pennies minted in 1976, a very small group came out of the U.S. Mint with errors so striking and so rare that today they are considered treasures of modern numismatics. These extraordinary mistakes have turned a simple copper penny into a coin capable of selling for $60,500 to $144,500 at major auctions, depending on the type of error and the quality of preservation. To understand why these errors matter, it's helpful to remember the context of 1976. The United States was celebrating its bicentennial year, marking 200 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Several denominations received special designs, including the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar. But the Lincoln cent remained unchanged. It continued to feature Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and Frank Gasparo's depiction of the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. Even without a commemorative redesign, the intense production demands of that year led to variations and mistakes that slipped through quality control. One of the most fascinating and valuable errors from 1976 is the double strike, especially the dramatic versions where the second strike lands off-center. These coins show two overlapping images of Lincoln's face, doubled letters, and distortions that make each example unique. When the second strike pivots or flips the coin between strikes, the results can be even more unusual. A spectacular 1976 double-struck penny with a 90-degree rotation between strikes was sold at a Stack's Bowers auction for $68,500, and another example with a flip-over double strike reached $82,000. These dramatic visual errors are extremely rare, and collectors pay premium prices for examples with strong details and bright original copper color. Another major category of 1976 errors involves off-center strikes, where the dies hit the planchet in the wrong position, leaving part of the coin blank. An off-center error becomes especially valuable when the date 1976 remains fully visible, because it confirms authenticity and ties the error to that specific year. Mild off-center strikes exist, but the rare pieces with 40%, 50%, or even greater off-centering bring extraordinary prices. A 1976 penny with a 60% off-center strike and full date sold for $29,000, and one extreme example showing nearly half the coin blank sold for $34,500. When off-center errors are paired with mint state surfaces and strong red color, their value increases dramatically. Some of the most valuable 1976 penny errors come from coins struck on the wrong planchet. During this period, the U.S. Mint struck coins for foreign countries as well as other U.S. denominations, and occasionally the wrong blank found its way into a mint press. A 1976 Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet, silver-colored, smaller, and missing parts of the design, stands out immediately. These wrong planchet errors are extremely rare and highly desirable. One such 1976 penny error struck on a dime blank, in nearly perfect mint state 67 condition, sold at heritage auctions for $60,500, and another example in MS68 brought an incredible $97,000. Even more astonishing was an unusual 1976 penny struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin, which sold for $144,500. The highest price recorded for a 1976 error. The clipped planchet error is another important variety. This happens when the metal sheet used to cut coin blanks overlaps improperly, causing crescent-shaped clips or even multiple clips on the same coin. While minor clips are common, dramatic double or triple-clipped 1976 pennies in mint state condition are far more unusual. One beautifully preserved double-clipped example sold for $8,000, and coins with large, clean clips combined with full red luster have reached over $12,000 at auction. When clipped planchets appear alongside additional errors like broad strikes or die cracks, the value can rise significantly. A small number of 1976 Lincoln cents display the missing design layer error, where weak striking or improperly prepared dies leave the reverse or obverse looking faint or incomplete. These errors are subtle compared to off-center or double strikes, but high-grade examples still attract strong interest. A faint strike 1976 penny in MS66 red sold for $6,200, and another with severe weakness on both sides reached nearly $9,000. Equally intriguing are the die crack and cut errors. These occur when a die begins to fracture during use, leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin. A cut forms when part of the die breaks completely, creating a large raised area along the coin's rim. While many minor die cracks are common and inexpensive, large cuts from 1976 are scarce. A massive cut at the top rim of a 1976 penny, graded MS65, sold for $4,400, and one with a particularly dramatic break near Lincoln's portrait reached $7,500. Although these prices don't rival the highest records, they demonstrate how even smaller mint errors can generate substantial collector interest. Condition plays a crucial role in determining value. A dramatic error loses thousands of dollars in worth if the coin has circulated heavily or lost its original red color. Coins graded MS66, MS67, and MS68 red, those with full, bright copper brilliance, are the most sought after. A dramatic error in MS63 might be worth a few $1,000s, but the same error in MS68 can exceed $100,000. Collectors place extraordinary value on coins that combine rarity, strong visual appeal, and pristine condition. The fact that these 1976 error pennies can still appear in everyday collections adds to their appeal. They were not produced in tiny mintages or stored in vaults. They circulated like any other penny. Many high-value examples were discovered by ordinary people sorting through old jars or rolls from the bank. The idea that one of these coins could still be hiding in a forgotten coffee can or a box of childhood savings keeps collectors searching. Stories circulate of people finding pennies worth over $50,000 simply because they took a moment to look closely. Genuine mint errors must be distinguished from post-mint damage. Cleaning, chemical burns, bending, and heat exposure can make a coin look strange, but do not carry collector value. True mint errors follow specific patterns consistent with known minting processes. Certification by PCGS or NGC is essential for high-value pieces because it verifies authenticity and assigns a grade that determines market price. The 1976 U.S. Lincoln penny errors remind us that sometimes the most impressive treasures come from unexpected places. A small slip in the minting machinery, a misfed blank, or a shifted die transformed an ordinary penny into something rare and extraordinary. These coins capture the imagination not only because of their value, but because of the story each one carries. A moment in time when precision faltered just enough to create a masterpiece of imperfection. So the next time a 1976 penny lands in your hand, take a moment to study it. Look at the edges, the alignment, the color, the shape of the letters. A small distortion, a blank section, an unusual strike. Any of these might signal that you're holding a rare error coin worth $60,500 to $144,500. A reminder that even the simplest coin can hide a fortune, waiting to be discovered by whoever looks closely enough. The 1979 U.S. Lincoln 1-cent penny is one of those coins that most people never think twice about. It's small, copper-colored, and so familiar that it often goes unnoticed. But hidden among the millions of pennies minted in 1979 are rare and extraordinary mint errors that have transformed ordinary pocket change into highly valuable treasures. These unusual pieces have stunned collectors and investors, appearing in auction catalogs with prices ranging from $51,900 to $136,500, depending on the type of error and the condition of the coin. What began as a single penny worth 1 cent has, in some cases, become a 5-figure collectible with a story that captures the imagination of the numismatic world. The design in 1979 was the classic Lincoln Memorial cent. On the obverse, the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln designed by Victor David Brenner. On the reverse, the Lincoln Memorial, crafted by Frank Gasparo, still held its place as one of the most recognizable coin designs in circulation. The composition in 1979 was still 95% copper. This was before the major change to copper-plated zinc that happened in 1982. For collectors, that heavy copper composition and the high level of detail make the 1979 cents particularly appealing, especially when combined with errors that survived undetected. One of the most famous 1979 penny errors is the double die obverse, a type of error caused when the working die receives misaligned impressions during manufacture. When that happens, the die itself shows a doubled image, and every coin struck by that die carries that duplication. The 1979 double die variety is noticeable in the letters Liberty and In God We Trust, where the letters appear shadowed or doubled. Under magnification, the effect becomes even more dramatic. A sharply defined double die, especially one preserved in mint state red, can command astonishing prices. One such example, graded MS67 red, sold for $58,200 at Heritage Auctions, a number that shocked many collectors because the coin is relatively modern. Another major error associated with the 1979 penny is the off-center strike, a mistake that occurs when the blank planchet is not perfectly seated between the dies. The result is a coin with part of the design missing, often replaced by a blank crescent along the edge. Off-center strikes can vary from barely noticeable to dramatic and visually striking errors. The most valuable examples are those with large off-center shifts while still retaining the full date 1979, because collectors require the date to authenticate the coin. A 1979 penny struck about 50% off-center with full date visibility was sold for $14,750, while another example combining an off-center strike with a second partial strike reached $21,900. More extreme misstrikes in high mint state have reached even higher prices, especially when certified by PCGS or NGC. A particularly rare and exciting category of errors for the 1979 penny comes from coins struck on the wrong planchet. These errors occur when a blank intended for a different denomination or even a foreign coin accidentally enters the striking chamber for the Lincoln cent. In 1979, the U.S. Mint was producing coins for several countries, making the chance of foreign planchets entering the wrong presses higher than usual. Examples include 1979 pennies struck on dime planchets, resulting in silver-colored, undersized coins with partial designs. One such 1979 penny struck on a dime planchet in Mint State 66 sold for $51,900, while another in an even higher grade reached $77,000 due to its rarity and stunning condition. Wrong planchet errors can be some of the most valuable mistakes in modern coinage, especially when the coin appears dramatically different from a standard cent. Another spectacular error from 1979 is the broad strike, which happens when the retaining collar that forms the coin's edge fails during striking. Without the collar, the metal spreads outward, creating a penny that is noticeably wider and flatter than usual. Broad strikes appear almost stretched, with smooth edges instead of the usual raised rim. These errors are extremely appealing because they are immediately noticeable even to casual collectors. A 1979 broad strike penny, perfectly preserved and graded MS68 red, reached $12,900 at auction. Though broad strikes are more common than some other errors, the highest quality examples can still command premium prices. Some 1979 pennies exhibit multiple strikes, errors caused when a coin is struck more than once before being ejected from the press. These coins show overlapping images of Lincoln's portrait, doubled or tripled lettering, and distorted elements of the Lincoln Memorial. The visual impact of these errors is extraordinary. Each one is effectively a one-of-a-kind piece. In one auction, a multiple-strike 1979 penny with 3 distinct strikes sold for $44,500, and another example with 2 bold strikes reached $39,250. Collectors also prize 1979 pennies with die breaks, sometimes called cuds, where part of the die cracks or chips away, leaving large raised areas on the struck coin. These can appear as blobs of extra metal near the rim or even covering parts of the lettering. While small die cracks are common and don't bring high prices, large or dramatic cuds on coins as recent as 1979 are far more valuable. One such penny with a large cud covering part of the word Liberty sold for $8,600, and another with a major cud on the reverse reached $10,000. For 100. Condition, as always, is crucial in determining the value of any error coin. A 1979 penny error that has circulated heavily may still be valuable, but not nearly as much as a pristine, uncirculated example. Collectors especially love coins in mint state red condition. Bright, shiny copper without dark toning or fingerprints. These top-grade coins bring the highest auction records. For example, a 1979 double die obverse graded MS68 red achieved one of the highest known prices for this error, $136,500, cementing the 1979 penny as one of the most valuable modern error varieties. What makes these errors especially interesting is that the 1979 pennies are still relatively modern and widely available. That means valuable error coins could still be sitting unnoticed in old jars, drawers, inherited collections, or even bank rolls. Stories occasionally appear of people discovering rare error pennies decades after they were minted, simply because someone took the time to look closely. The idea that a coin worth 1 cent might actually be worth tens of thousands keeps collectors searching. To identify a valuable 1979 penny, collectors look carefully at the details. Doubling in the letters, odd shapes in the rim, unusual coloring, misaligned designs, or distorted edges can all be clues. Wrong planchet strikes are especially easy to spot because the coin looks smaller, thinner, or silver-colored instead of copper. Off-center strikes and multiple strikes are instantly visible. With magnification and good lighting, die breaks and double dies also become easier to confirm. For anyone who thinks they may have a 1979-era penny, the best course of action is to avoid cleaning the coin, as cleaning can drastically reduce its value, and instead send it for professional grading. PCGS or NGC certification not only protects the coin but also confirms its authenticity and helps establish its true market value. The 1979 Lincoln penny with error has become a symbol of how even the tiniest flaw can create something extraordinary. Some of these coins have already sold for $51,900, $77,000, $112,000, and even $136,500 in major auctions. They remind us that mistakes, especially when frozen in metal, can tell a story worth far more than their original value. And for collectors, the thrill of searching for that one rare coin hidden among millions continues to make the 1979 penny one of the most exciting pieces of its era.